Is the same old initiative just getting boring?
Well, here are 5 new variants that you can use for initiative. Welcome everyone, I'm Sean, this is Tony, and today we're going to be talking about a couple different ways that you can run initiative besides the typical D20 plus your dex modifier.
Right, it gets boring after a while, just nothing really changes unless someone takes that alert feat,
Yeah, and sometimes initiative and even combat can get a little bit predictable. Oh, this guy's always first, this guy's always last. With some of these variants, you can actually kind of change things up a little bit and kind of add a little bit of variety within combat itself.
Now, these aren't the only variants that are out there, just 5 that we picked. So let's get into them.
Yes, and the first one is a pretty interesting one. So this one is going to be multiple turns per round. Essentially, you're going to be running initiative as usual, but you're going to subtract 10 from the total for each of those rounds. So as long as it doesn't end up below 0, people can actually get 2 turns within the same initiative count.
Right. So you, let's say you roll a 17. Your first turn in initiative order is at 17, and then you minus 10 from that, and your second is at 7.
Yeah, now this is a little bit easier to run when you kind of have a smaller group. If you have like 6 or 7 players and everyone's getting 2 turns, it can get a little tricky. But the nice thing about this is that having 2 turns in the same round kind of gives a little bit more urgency and a little bit more excitement in combat, especially for players.
And you can kind of think about how you're going to react and what you're going to do next. A little bit more so than if you're having to wait an entire round to do something.
Yeah.
Plus, spells that last a round can technically take a little longer.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one way you can do it. Now, the next one is another one that you can also use, and this is going to be involving a different mechanic called speed factor.
Now, speed factor is something that's directly out of the DM's guide.
Yeah, so essentially, you're going to roll initiative, but now the size of the creature and the action that you're going to take is going to actually subtract or add on to whatever your roll is going to be.
Your little nimble guys there with their knives, let's say you're making a ranged attack of throwing the knife, you throw it. If you're a gnome or what have you, you're a lot smaller. But the cool thing about this too is that it changes the way spells operate.
Yeah, so now you're kind of encouraged to use spells like, let's say, enlarge or shrink. Let's say you want that guy to actually go a little later in the initiative roll. You
don't necessarily mind that he's going to club you over the head and deal a lot more damage because the strength is going up or anything like that.
Yeah, because he's going to go most likely later in that turn.
Yeah, you will have gotten at least 3 fireballs off before that.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a neat way to kind of run combat. Sometimes you're more encouraged to, do those smaller attacks, or, those smaller creatures will have the advantage in combat. So again, another interesting way to kind of mix things up for combat.
It also makes fairies extremely dangerous.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
All right, now our next one with that, and there's a couple of different ones that we've gone over.
Yeah.
This one is action points. Yeah. I was not sold on this.
So you might have seen the system utilized in a lot of different video games like Divinity Original Sin or other things like that. Essentially, the idea behind this is that you get a pool of points, and sometimes you roll for these points, or sometimes it's a set pool, and different actions and movement will use up these points, and you're kind of limited to what you can do in your turn.
My main problem with this, though, is that it gets too convoluted and confusing for each player that's at the table. Oh, I've got this many points, and then they carry over to the next round. And do I need to roll again? Yes, but then you subtract this, and then you can do that. Well, I've got more points. Can I cast 2 spells? No, the rules still say you can only cast 1 spell. Well, then what do I do with the points? Oh, they carry over. Yeah. It's just kind of like,
so there's a lot of different ways that you can kind of go about this, and there's a lot of different ways that exist out there. But I think the nice thing about this is that it kind of adds a little bit of strategy, like, this will take up a lot more points, or if I decide to not do something, I can have like a bigger turn, on the next round. And again, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. I think the idea here is that it kind of just mixes things up a little bit and adds a little bit of strategy.
You know what I'm thinking? You know where I go with this. Hit dice. I wonder if you can make it something like that it's based off of, your pool of your hit dice and what you've done, and then you can expend those to get those things, and maybe you can expend it because you're exerting yourself.
This is true, right? Yeah. And, we always talk about how people don't utilize hit dice enough.
It's just me. I can't help it. I like hit dice.
Yeah, exactly. So action points, cool ideas. Make sure you find one that actually works for your party. The next one that we're going to go over is one that's kind of been around for a little while and still technically in a bit of a testing mode. But this one is called Greyhawk Initiative.
Now, this is based off the old Greyhawk kind of stuff with this, but I really like this one because this, it was really originally released as a UA for us here in 5th edition, and I like the concept of this.
Yeah, so essentially you actually kind of want to get a lower number on your roll, and depending on the action that you're doing is actually going to determine what type of dice you roll. So like if you're throwing like, you know, a little dagger, you roll a d4, but if you're trying to cast like a spell, you roll a d10. So depending on the action that you're taking, you're going to add a bigger or smaller number, and it will determine where you are in initiative.
Right, and the reason I like this is that it kind of makes combat a little bit more surprising because it's based off of what you're doing as an action with it, but you're still running in that order. So it's nicer to go lower on this one.
Yeah, exactly. Now, keep in mind, some of these systems, like this one in particular, is going to kind of force you to choose your action before the round starts. So it kind of adds a little bit of a different kind of dynamic there where you're trying to plan even farther ahead. You know, typical
and takes away a little bit, too.
A little bit, too, yeah.
You don't get to tactically plan as well with it.
Yeah, so you're kind of forced to choose an action beforehand, and you kind of have to work with that, like, oh crap, I already chose to cast a spell, I'm just gonna have to work with that situation. So there's a little bit of give and take with some of these initiative rules.
But the good thing about that, though, is that it does speed up the table combat.
It does.
Because everyone's already decided on what they do, now you're just rolling damage out.
Exactly.
From there.
Yeah, this last one that we're going to go over is pretty simple. It's kind of two different ones. So essentially, it's going to be between, you know, side initiative and rolling in each round.
Right. And I like the roll each round thing for when you're doing PvP combat.
Yeah.
Like you have 2 of your players that are there, and the 2 of them want to fight. Who hasn't had this happen at the table? But what I like about that is each round they re-roll their initiative. Because then, you know, it's not, oh, well, you hit me, then I hit you, then you hit me, then I hit you.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you hit me, then I hit you. Then you hit me, then I hit you.
And, you know.
Then you hit me, then. Okay, I get it.
And, you know, the nice thing is it works really well when you're kind of running like smaller parties. Like if you only get like 2 or 3 players, you know, it kind of helps mix things up when you're rolling initiative for each round. And going back to side initiative, a side initiative is kind of like an easier way to run initiative, especially if you have like hordes of enemies and you have like way too many to worry about. A lot of people will use side initiative because it's a lot simpler, and depending on the situation, it can make things go faster too.
And you've probably used it to some extent with it when you're doing groups of monsters.
Yeah.
Because you as the DM sit there and go, I am not rolling initiative for 8 to 10 monsters. Forget that.
Right.
So, you know, you kind of group them and you do, okay, that group goes on this initiative turn.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's just you're doing it with your players at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Some people kind of don't like this because, you know, it's very predictable as what's going to happen. But this could work in your favor as a DM as well if all of your monsters are going first. Now, there's a lot of different ways that you can even spice up these different initiative rules. Some people might use a wisdom modifier instead of a dex modifier when determining initiative. And there's a lot of different things that you can do, and we want to hear about it from you. If you have like a certain way that you kind of run initiative, or if you have any like kind of neat tips that you use, be sure to comment down below. We can talk about the ones that we use, and we always learn more from our viewers as well.
That's true. You know, it just gave me an idea. That strength stat is not really used that often.
This is true.
We should use strength for initiative.
Yes, you just kind of burl your way into combat. And
well, I'm just saying, it's that and what else? I mean, it's that and carrying things. It has really nothing to do with it. So remember, the best campaigns are always the ones that are homebrewed. So until next time,
keep brewing.